We were just going to come on here quick today and do an announcement on the contest winner and the winner of the next contest. But we've had so many questions come in. Gobby, how do you feel about doing some Q&A on here as well?
I'm always up for Q&A.
Okay, good. Well, without further ado, the ReadyGo.ca contest for the $40 coupon code at ReadyGo.ca to enter in and use however you like. Do you? We got people coming in. Do you want to make the announcement, Gobby?
No, man, you go for it.
The one question that we, and of course, this guy, not only does he send in good questions, he sends in a large volume of questions, but the one question that he posed to us that was interesting, and as simple as it was, it created a huge amount of debate, not only on the show, but on subsequent shows after that, was the question, is Todd Hutchings the best pound-for-pound arm wrestler in North America? So that's the one. That's the question. Constant incel that can't get laid, a.k.a. Sean. Hopefully you can go there and get yourself some nice clothes, and maybe that will help.
Congrats, buddy. It was a tough one because I initially when Jason Mitschke said that one question about the over the top movie simulation deal, in my mind that was it because it was so in depth and had so much. I had to think so much about it, but that was a tough one. So it was between that and Jason Mitschke. Brandon Irwin also had a couple good ones. This was a tough one, but yeah, we went with incel because basically his one question brought so much feedback and thought-provoking feedback. It created so much buzz that I figured, and he threw out so much volume as well. It seemed like a good candidate for the first winner.
So that being said, we got the next contest. So the contest for October, and if you go to the ReadyGo.ca website and you click on About Us and scroll to the bottom, it's already on their website. So there is a picture, and the contest is post your best arm wrestling sayings for this image. If your idea is chosen, you will win the Arm Crossfire $40 store coupon and get 10% off anything in our store for life. So forever, you will have a 10% coupon code at ReadyGo.ca. Your name will also be printed on the shirt, and we will sell it in the store. And keep in mind your ideas have to fit on a t-shirt with the image. So think hard and be original. There you have it.
Nice.
So we have our contest winner. We have our next contest announced. We'd like to thank our sponsors, ReadyGo.ca. And as usual, Smirnoff Ice. Quit taking baby sips, Gobby. That's what I keep hearing about you.
Yeah. Story of my life.
So let's do the Q&A, man, because we have a ton of stuff coming in. And recognizing the Patreon members, we got Brandon Irwin, Tier 1. Jorn Herold Hebu, Tier 1. Sean Russell of ReadyGo.ca, Tier 2. And Jorn Herold Hebu, his question is, I used to be a bench presser equipped, and like you, SB, I did some decent weights, 300 kilos in the 120 kilo category, which is fantastic. Do you guys find that having a strong bench press correlate well with being a good presser on the table? In my year and a half arm wrestling, I've honestly done top roll, but considering to try more press. Thoughts? Good presser on the table based on having a good bench press.
You want me to take this one?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
In my opinion, it's not so much what your bench press is, because bench press is not the best. It doesn't have the greatest carryover to the arm wrestling table. Having a very strong pectorals, very strong chest does. Side pressure comes from many different directions. It pivots hard off your elbow, but it also comes strongly through your chest. Now, your chest doesn't come into play if your elbow is not strong enough. It's like an engine and a transmission. Your engine can't go to the power of the engine cannot go to the wheels if the transmission cannot hold the load. So if your elbow is strong enough and has a strong ligament built over time, you can, for example, for me, after 10, 15 years, every ounce of power I have from my pecs and shoulders, I can get into the match because my elbow is an incredibly conditioned transmission. As a newbie, that's why we see a lot of newbies with a 400 or 500 pound bench that really can't incorporate it into the table simply because the elbow cannot transmit the power to the table. But my answer to anyone is, as you get into the sport and your elbow develops, the more chest power, the more internal rotation of your shoulder you can incorporate, you can have, the more in time, not as a newbie, but in time, that will absolutely translate to the table. In other words, side pressure.
Yeah, and the bench press is good for overall health and wellness of chest and shoulders. But if you examine the press itself, it's more of a tricep move than a chest move. So
I also don't love the bench press. I think you can get, well, I mean, it's a power movement. If you're a bench presser, if you're a power lifter, it's fundamental. But in terms of carryover to other sports, I prefer dumbbell flies, dumbbell presses. I prefer. I think you can get as much pec strength and pec development and minimize shoulder injuries along the way. Notorious bench pressers eventually fall into massive injuries, structural injuries. So although it's a cool thing to say I got a 500, 600, 700 bench press, when it comes to arm wrestling, for me, I find a good strong dumbbell press on an incline bench is more conducive to side pressure on the table than a flat bench press is.
Ideally for me, it would be a neutral grip, narrow bench press. So you need a special bar for that, specialized equipment. But as far as bench goes, we've also seen a number of really good benchers come in and have limited success in arm wrestling. And we got possibly the best bench presser of all times in
which leads people to believe that the chest strength isn't that important. It is. The problem is you cannot get that chest into the match if you don't have a strong elbow. It just doesn't correlate that way unless you're a shoulder presser. But even a shoulder presser, a lot of that comes through the elbow. A guy has an 800-pound bench press and he brings it to the table. If his elbow he's got a virgin green elbow for arm wrestling, he may maybe get 150 pounds of pressure out of that, or 10% of that bench press ultimate strength onto the table. So I mean, it's people say, well, it doesn't really. I beat a top roller guy with a big bench press, right. But if you can take a guy with the elbow and the structure after 5, 7, 8 years in the arm wrestling world, competing frequently, and then you add 300, 400 pounds of bench press to him, you'll see how dominant he'll become. Chest plays a big factor.
Agreed. So we got Incel, who did send us a question. Even though he's just won the contest, he's going to keep going, and we appreciate that. Could the Todd or did we answer this question already?
What is it?
It was the Todd Hutchings that pulled against Jerry or Devin, for that matter, beat the Todd Hutchings that beat. Oh no, this was beat Krasimir 5-1 at Arm Fight 41, Zoloev 6-0 at Arm Fight 42 in 2012. I think we did answer this on the last show, didn't we?
We did. Yeah.
Yes. So my apologies. Sean Russell, the man himself. How do you train to have a strong hit? Yeah. Time pay. Well, you know what? When I first started getting into it, I thought that you could really train to have a lightning fast hit. And what you discover is, for me, it was a matter of timing. And ability to incorporate as much force in a millisecond as I possibly could. When I first started training, and I think way back to the first year I was in it, I actually used to make tapes of different cadences of Ready Go and load up with bands and try to hit as close to that go as I could. And I think I developed a pretty good hit over the years, but I also developed a style of no load leading up to the go. So it would really frustrate my opponents in some cases. And practicing going from 0 to all out in a split second. How do you train that? It's a matter of timing. And if you're not ready to play the head games you got to play with someone to get them to not load with you at all, then it won't work for you as effectively as it should. What do you think, Gobby?
The hit is divided into two areas: the physical and the psychological. To talk about the physical, we looked at Sarah Bachman training for Gabby, and she was ripping this weight across the table, this cable. 100 miles an hour. It served. She could not incorporate 1% of that against Gabby because you cannot hit something you cannot control. She could not control Gabby's hand. All that speed, all that aggression meant nothing. Gabby was so much stronger in the hand, so you cannot hit what you cannot control. So that's the physical part of hitting. So my answer to most people that say, how can I become faster? Build a stronger hand. When you have the confidence in having this better, stronger hand on the grip, you feel free to engage full mental aggression on the ready go. The second part, if the hand is there, the second part is the psychological, and that is basically full commitment to engage every part on one angle when that ref says, or whatever, whenever you decide to go, everything's engaged, 100% full committal to that one move, to that one vector, whether it's back or sideways or whatever. Again, you can have full psychological aggression. If the hand isn't stronger, you're not going anywhere. So my best answer to someone like that is, unless you have an absolutely dominant hand that dominates everyone, or most people, then you can work on explosiveness and the emotional part of it, the mental part of it. Until you get to that point, build a hand, build a stronger hand, build a more dominant hand, build a better setup position. Kind of like Travis doesn't have the strongest hand in arm wrestling, but his setup with his riser and his angles and everything makes him one of the most dangerous setup pullers in arm wrestling. He doesn't have a dominant hand, but he's highly aggressive, but he has a very dominant move, very dominant angles, and a very, very strong riser and pronator.
Yeah. Blasting through these. Sheldon Short. Last show I saw Chris and yourself keep referring to level 5 competitors. I understand that what a level 5 is and how you would achieve recognition for this. Is this type of reference something that only Arm Crossfire uses? Yes, I think it is. Or is it used in different leagues or of the sport? And could both of you give us viewers some examples of different pullers and where they would stand in this ranking, just to give an insight into the difference in levels of pullers without Chris pissing anyone off? So I'm not sure we can do that, because some people would be insulted at where they sit.
People will stopping to have to be sensitive for me. It's just the way it goes.
Okay, well, this is not an Arm Crossfire thing. This is more of a
Chris Gobby thing.
Chris Gobby thing. You have invented this. I kind of like it. So, well, I mean, level 5s.
The level 5 is the most rare. Maybe it represents 3 to 5% or even less, probably 3% of the arm wrestling population at most. This is the guy that comes into a tournament. Now, the tier system is all based on your performance based on a hypothetical tournament. Well, he comes into the tournament and he's going to basically breeze through preliminaries. He's the clear favorite to win or be in the finals, and yes, like it's just a clear favorite, dominant. We're talking Rustam Babaev and 187 WAF. We're talking stuff like that. We're talking Dennis. We're talking Pushkar. We're talking guys that everyone in the room fears this man going into that weight class.
Yeah,
that's a 5.
So quickly, just I'll throw a tier at you, and just give me a few names off the top, and then explain it. But easy ones, not the ones that are like debatable. Like if I'm not going to say Devin, because then we'll sit here and debate where Devin sits, right?
Yeah.
So tier 4.
Ryan SB's a clear cut 4 with the left arm, right arm, arguably maybe. Most of your competitors at Wall title holders are 4s. Now, when I'm going to framework this into the world. So when I'm talking my tier right now, we're talking in the world. So when you look at Justin, you look at Storm, Shalino, you look at Sam, you look at Tony, these are 4s. A 5, you have to be able to do damage at the world level. I mean, you have to have Eastern Europeans scared to pull you or concerned. None of these guys present that, with the exception of Todd Hutchins, who I believe is 5. So they're basically 4s. Most of the arm wrestling world falls into 3s and 4s. The novice and amateurs, of course, are the 1s and the 2s. Some amateurs, most of the amateurs fall into the 2. So yeah, Sam Harris, Tony, Storm, these are 4s. Now, on certain days they can look like 5s. On other days when they lose, they can look like 3s. It's just the tier system is a general framework that can help to put someone in a class, and it creates conversation. It's not perfect, and yes, some people fall in between both, and they can be criticized. It's just something I came up with years ago when I was doing the rankings. to help give people and also people would ask me, people would wonder where they fall in, and so I tell someone they're a 1 or a 2, and they get pissed off and block me.
Tier 3.
It's a framework. It's just general
Yeah.
framework. What it is. It's not a perfect science.
So where would a 3 be? Who would it be? A couple of examples of easy 3s that would be recognizable, and that might even be tricky, right?
Threes are very tricky because 3s can go to a 2 or a 4 based on their performance that day. I'm a great example of a 3 with my right arm. My right arm can go into a tournament, a strong tournament, and do well, or it can win 2 matches and lose 2 quick. It's basically a 3 is the person that goes into a pro tournament. Now, when I mean a pro, I mean good cash. It's drawing the elite guys out, and he can mix it up. On a given day, he's not going to win the tournament. He will not win it, but he can fall into the top 3 with a good draw. But he's most likely going to win 1 or 2 matches and then fade as the preliminary matches get stronger. That's a 3.
Yeah. All right. I think that pretty much covers the tier question. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's easier if someone gives me a name and I give them a tier.
Yeah. I think that. I mean, tier 5 might even be 1%, the top 1%.
It's super. It's super. The 1s and the 5s are very well. 1s, most we don't really recognize 1s. We don't really know them, but the 5s are definitely the most rarest. The 2s, the 2 to 4 obviously is the most.
Yeah.
90% of the sport falls in between 2 and 4.
Yeah. So Sheldon says, I have just finished watching episode 12, and you fellas had spoken a little bit about my training regimen, or a little bit about training, and my regimen is as follows. Monday morning to Friday morning, 1 muscle group for no more than 1 hour. Then evening, I do half-hour cardio plus strictly arm wrestling movements with a table and functional trainer. Both you guys stated 1 hour less in the gym a day. Is that all you do, or do you incorporate an evening workout also?
That's a good question. You want to go first?
Well, I don't. I mean, hey, Wayne Withers is on here. Wayne Withers,
congrats.
Way to go, man. No, I don't do evening work, and simply because I don't have time. Like, my workouts get done in the morning. I get it all in the morning. I don't know if I'd have the recovery ability to do 2-a-days. And I certainly concentrate 3 days a week on arm wrestling specific stuff as my main workout. So throwing it in the evening, it wouldn't be good for me. If you have the time and the ability to put some cardio and some specific training in the evening, good for you. Everybody is different. That's where we get caught up, because what works great for you might not work for the next guy.
Not a big fan of 2-a-days. I am my training is always. I struggle with warming up. I struggle with cooling down. I struggle with volume at 50-40% of my max. What I seem to gravitate to most is as hard as I can for as long as I can until my body's absolutely says no. I'll give you an example of last Friday. I hooked up my 25-foot rope, and I would do rope climbs. I would do a set of rope climbs, which is about 15 feet, 20 feet. I come down, and of course my upper body's, my lats and hands and forearms are all pumped. So I would do 50 burpees. Now my lower body's cooked. I go back to doing the full 15, 20 feet on the rope. And I would do that back and forth. And after about 4 rounds, I had to take a minute break. Then when my heart rate gets down to about 120, 130, I do it again. Heart rate goes up to 180, 185. I do 2-3 more rounds. Then I take another break. I did this for about 28 minutes. And then I'm fucking cooked. Quads, ass, calves, forearms, lats, calluses on my hands. 28-minute workout. That's probably harder than the workouts that most people do. I don't like sweating. So when I work out, I sweat. I take a shower. I'm done. I don't want to be taking another shower and sweating 6 hours later. I don't have the schedule. I don't have the time. My mind does not work on high volume, low intensity. It's not what I enjoy doing. I've seen many arm wrestlers do hours and hours of repetition work with handles, and I don't do that. I'd rather take a day off, and when I get to it, hit 80, 90% of my max, 70% of my max, and go to absolute failure. There's something with not going to failure, complete failure, that doesn't suit me very, very well. So I'm not saying it doesn't work, and I commend those that can do it. I'm a 1 workout a day guy, and as hard as I can push. And if everything's sore the next day, I don't do anything but stretch.
My workouts. my workouts can be a little complicated, and my schedule can be even more complicated because I got a couple of night shifts that get thrown in there, which absolutely just destroys me for training. But it's I have my workout split into a 2-week schedule where there's volume, there's power, there's even recovery workouts where I'm doing squats the day after an arm wrestling practice.
Yeah.
So it can be super complicated. It can be, as simple as you want. But if it's working for you and you're getting gains, keep doing it. But 2-a-days, you will probably never see me do that just because my wife would kill me.
I guess what I wanted to mention last episode, but I forgot, which is really good to do with anyone at any level, is to create a journal of your key movements that you want to be strong at, whether it's chest movement, an arm wrestling cable movement. Have 2 or 3 of those and drop them over a period of a month. As long as you're gaining incrementally every week, or even every 2 weeks, just keep doing it. Don't change it until you hit a plateau. But as long as you're making gains in things that you think are detrimental, or not detrimental, but very important to your game, your skill set, just keep doing that. It's when the gains stop happening that you have to start making adjustments. But I'm a big fan on keeping a journal of your gains. Big fan of that.
Did you happen to see in the comments right now that Ryan Bowen's giving you some training advice?
Oh yeah. It's hard to take what comes out of his mouth as genuine or not genuine. Well, I just, he's a salesman, right? I don't know if he's trying to help my training or he's trying to sell me a TV. It's Ryan Bowen. Could be doing either or. Not a bad guy. Just he's a salesman, man. He's a salesman.
Some of the stuff he's doing with I've been watching all the stuff he's posting on Instagram and with Todd Hutchings down in Australia, and it looks interesting.
It's a little bit more it's too convoluted for my liking, and although I think Todd's a genius, my side pressure goes as my elbow can take it. I've taken more bangs on my elbow over the period of 15 years than most people, only because I'm not an attack style arm wrestler. I'm not fast, and I basically let everyone get what they want, and I go through them. So when it comes to side pressure, sometimes I go 5 weeks without doing any side pressure stuff because my elbow can't handle it. And other times my elbow feels great, and I go to practice and I can do all the essential stuff that I need to do, and it's fine. But to create a routine for me makes no sense because it goes as my elbow goes. My transmission's fucked. I'm 6 weeks in the garage. My transmission feels great. I'm killing it in the gym. But yeah, anything Todd Hutchins recommends or does, trust me, I've followed, I've looked at it, I've researched it, I've incorporated it. It's just tough with my elbow.
Now we got a series of questions from Kel. And it's Kelly Leach by the looks of it. So hello guys, first off, just wanted to say love the show, keep up the good work. Had a few minutes, thought I would rattle off a few questions. A total of 11 questions. And a lot of them are based on Canadian arm wrestlers, which is cool.
Quick shout out to Kelly. That tier 5 grinding puller. That fucker pulls hard. Kelly never quits on the table.
He's fun to watch.
Yeah,
him and his brother and his dad and his uncle.
Never gives up.
Yeah. So, first question. Who is the greatest Canadian arm wrestler of all time, male and female? And I can probably answer this quick for myself because the Grippler and I just had a long conversation about it. He gave me a shout after the wall card. We talked a lot about who we thought was the best ever in Canada. Now, I am going to say that the best male Canadian arm wrestler of all time is Dave Hicks.
Yeah.
Accolades, stories of going to tournaments in Russia where the Russians actually sneak the Crussian Russian down into his weight class because they're sick of Dave Hicks beating up on everyone all the time, and still manages to win the tournament easily. The Golden Bear tournaments, all the WAF titles. Dave Hicks, in my opinion, is the best male Canadian arm wrestler of all times.
Female?
Ooh, that's a different story.
Well, let's stick with male while we're on male. I'll go
Okay.
with mine. My initial reaction was Earl or Devin. Earl because of his pure accolades in the time frame that I've been in arm wrestling. When I came into arm wrestling in 2004, Dave was fading out, mostly reffing and pulling masters. Earl and Mike Gould just lighting it up at Canadians and Worlds. You yourself, you're in that category as well. In the new YouTube generation of super matches and cash and this and that, Devin seems to be, it's hard to not consider Devin just based on reputation. However, the answer is Dave Hicks. If you look at, and of course he was not a big guy. He was a lightweight and a middleweight. We tend to overlook those guys, just like on the world level, Travis overlooks Engen and Dave Patton. But Dave Hicks, when you look at how feared he was within his weight class, and of course we're talking about the best arm wrestler or the most. We're not talking about the overall. We're talking within his weight class. I've heard legends of or the myth of Dave Hicks going to the Golden Bear and how he was feared over there in Russia. So
I'll tell you what. You talked about a tier 5 being a North American that can walk in the room and the Eastern Europeans are afraid of him. That's Dave Hicks.
Yeah. So the answer, I'm with you. And it's hard because Dave Hicks did not have from what I remember, he did not have a loud personality. He was not like, if I was a tier 5 going to Russia, if you think I'm an asshole now, if I was a tier 5 being feared all over the world, I would not be able to be withstood. I'll be assassinated.
Dave Hicks is, I believe he started his arm wrestling career at the age of 40. I think that's how late he started. And he amassed so many titles, and he is probably the kindest.
Yeah.
He's one of the best guys I've ever met in my life, and he still referees at the world level. And it wasn't that long ago that Dave Hicks would jump into classes at the world still and dominate, even whether it's masters, grandmasters. But he was winning world titles while I was arm wrestling still. When I first started out, he would jump in there and bring home gold medals no problem.
And from what I remember, if you compare him to Dave Patton was a very hyper-aggressive, almost wanted to cheat, get everything he could possibly get at the setup, and everything the ref would let him to get, and even then. Dave Hicks, from what I recall, just wanted a fair setup. Wanted everything even, everything fair, and he took control. Very, very special dude. One of my regrets is that I didn't start earlier to know him better in his prime. I only met him as he was, somewhat past his prime in reffing. And everything I hear is basically based on myth and legends. But that's one of my few regrets is that I didn't start earlier, only so I could have known him better or seen more of what he did.
And then we got the question of the best female arm wrestler of all time from Canada.
That's a little bit easier.
Is it?
I think so.
You're gonna say Barb?
No.
Who are you gonna say?
Well, I as soon as the question comes in, I come up. I have an answer. Now, I'm not giving it much thought, but my initial reaction was Joyce King. Only because when I came in, you were the best. You were world class. When I came into Worlds, I won nationals. I went to Tokyo with you and Joyce. I flew with Joyce and her husband, and so I got to know Joyce very well. Joyce was in her peak. You and Joyce were both kicking ass. So for me, Joyce was world class. You were world class, representing Canada. But I mean, again, Barb did most of her damage prior to me getting into the sport. Joyce was in her prime, so it's hard. I'm kind of biased. I'd have to, and all I heard about Barb was that she would be able to rip apart the 154 men's class. I never gripped up with her. I gripped up with Joyce a couple times, but again, I'm kind of ignorant with the women's because all I know is Joyce, and I followed Joyce. I really didn't. There's also Josie Morneau, who was a rival to Joyce for many years. Again, when I started, but I don't really know what Barb did. I know she was an elite puller. I know she went. I know she was absolutely an elite arm wrestler. I just don't know her accolades.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would probably say Barb or Joyce would fit in the category nicely, but I think Barb has amassed more victories over the years. Ramsey's asking me, Ryan, can you answer my question? He says, Ryan, when will you destroy Larrett's egos? I'm not kidding, bro. And he says, yes, I do believe that you are the best Canadian arm wrestler we watched in the elite arm wrestling competition in Moldova. You pull with the real champs. Man, I don't know. I don't know. A couple of people have thrown matches, proposals Devin's way about arm wrestling me, and the answer is always the same. We'll see what the league does. So unless it happens in WAL, it probably will never happen. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what's up. It sounds like everything I'm hearing as far as it being proposed to WAL is it's going to be Matt Mask versus Wagner for the left arm early in the season. I'm sure Paul Passmore would have something interesting to say about that. I think he's watching, and I don't know. It's going to be it'd be interesting. I don't know. Whatever the league wants to do, I need to start looking for opportunities outside the league just for the time being until I get the call. So I can't sit here waiting for them to come up with something. So that's where that's at. Number 2 from Kelly Leach. Has Canadian Nationals lost its prestige? If so, why? It seems like back in the day, the 90s and early 2000s, the competition was better, and the national title was held to a higher standard.
He's absolutely right.
Can you put your finger on it? Because I think I agree with you that, and it drives me crazy because I love the national championships. I love going there. It was the scariest tournament for me every year because you had Len Houghton, Earl Wilson, Mike Gould, Greg Boyce. All those guys in my class could show up, and it could be the hardest goddamn tournament you were ever in. But what's happened? Is it just the level of puller, or is it everyone holding out to get on TV?
It's a combination of a few things. One thing our Canadians always had that I'm prideful for is we always had one nationals. We never had two. And people that go tend to be very loyal. They make a family vacation for it, and they go across Canada. So Canada has to be very prideful about that. But Kelly's right, and one of the main reasons is the emergence of pro leagues. And these pro leagues come with promises, deceitful or not. They come with promises, and they come with hopes of this and that. It started with UAL, and I assume it started with UAL in 2006, 7, or 8, whenever that started. No, it was later than that. But all of a sudden, you had a fraction of the arm wrestling population kind of like running that way, hoping and that something could be bigger, something could represent something where they could get paid, not just have to pay out. A way to get on TV. But you still have the arm wrestling purists that would just go to nationals, or go to nationals at least. But I think it's the answer to that is the emergence of the pro leagues, and also I also noticed something else. Be a little bit critical here, but when I first started arm wrestling, 04, 05, 6, 7, the fee to get into the nationals was relatively the same. Then all of a sudden, now it's like $80 an arm or $75 an arm, and you have a family with a wife and a couple of kids. All of a sudden, just the entry fee to the tournament could be $300, $400, $500. Like, and they'll say, well, it's this, it's that, it's this, but I don't know. I don't know the politics, and I don't know if they're making a profit. And I just know a couple of years ago there was a huge profit made from the math that I did, and I don't think I think the pullers might have been raked over the coals a bit. But that's all speculation.
I can tell you from a guy that's promoted 2 national championships, 2004 and 2010. Those are my tournaments. You got to raise a crazy amount of money to put those tournaments on, because there's so many weight classes, there's so many officials and referees you need to bring in, and they are contracted and agreed to in the. They have a standard agreement with the CAWF. You got to pay X amount of dollars to them for their fees. You got to pay rooms and all that stuff. And I agree. I mean, they shouldn't be coming on their own dime to be an official, but the tournament is so huge. But it should also be possibly looking for more sponsors to pay, because that fee is crazy. Like when my daughter and I arm wrestling, I think it was $300 for us both to enter the tournament. Like it was, and I pulled 4 classes, so I mean that's on me. But it was just shy of that, I guess. And I still love the nationals. I still will go when I can, but unless I'm going on to the worlds,
yeah,
there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I think maybe it's also because there are so many more events that you can go to now, that maybe people are just not chasing titles as much as they are fame or money. And we saw this happen, and I'm not picking on Devin. I'm not. But at one point, he made the statement that he didn't want to go to the Nationals because there was nothing really in it for him anymore, and he could go somewhere else and make some money arm wrestling, and that's what his goal was. And he's been successful achieving that goal. So I don't know. It's I don't know if we'll see it come back. It is the amateur side of the sport, and my intention is to go. Well, it's in Winnipeg next year, so I'm going for sure. It's 45 minutes from my house, and probably go on to the Worlds again. But you know, the other thing is the end of the line. You also got to piss in the cup, right?
Right. Also, I think the world record for entry fees for Canadian arm wrestling for nationals was broken this year. Was it not?
Broken because of the children's classes. So the youth was huge, which is great. Like that would also then lead you to believe that the future of the sport and the national championships is going to be bright because so many kids are coming up through the system. Yeah. Anyway, we got. I'm going to read a couple of comments on here because I want to keep up. But I mentioned Paul. He said he wants Wagner. What do you think of that match?
See, I want to see more Wagner because I don't know if it was so much Devin being dominant. Because we haven't seen anything from Wagner in half a decade. So, although he's big, aggressive, we haven't seen him pull at the world level for 5-6 years. So he might have just come in at 60% or 70% of what we recall, and Devin exploited that. So I'd like to see him pull. I'd love to see him pull you. I'd love to see Matt. On top of my list would be you. Matt's up there, and of course Paul. You could argue Paul should is a candidate for any of these matches the way he's been pulling.
Maybe Paul and I should have an eliminator left-handed.
Yeah.
While Wagner's messing with Matt, Paul and I can pull in a match.
Don't we have Paul coming on Wednesday?
I didn't announce it yet, but yes, Paul is coming on Wednesday.
Huge. Yeah.
His next question. How would you intrigue top-ranked pullers to nationals? Money, same location every year, etc. I don't think that there's a way to really do that. And
there's a way.
Well, what is the way? Because I think it's a values shift almost that people need to come out and start doing that again. The money, not so much the money that you would win, but the money you would spend or not have to spend would be a good way to start. Yeah. What are your ideas?
I don't think people mind spending money if they get something. If the top three or the people on the podium gets, I think it's a trade off. I think I would like to see the Nationals start giving away money for top three, not for kids or masters or anything, but for the open classes. It would bring more prestige, in my opinion. It would give it more of a pro look rather than just a high end amateur look. Is it feasible? That's a different question. Rick Pickney would probably say absolutely not. And of course, the trophies, the medals they give away are exceptional. So I mean, there's money going into that, and a lot of people that travel for nationals could care less about the money. I just say if there's a way where you can mathematically give $1,000 to first, or $1,750, $500, something like that. I think it would up the prestige. But how do you come up with that money? It's not just going to fall from the sky. But I think that would be pretty cool.
It was a few years ago that Butcher came up and said he gave away, he had an overall at the Nationals, and it was an eliminator overall. So the heaviest two winners arm wrestled, and then they had to stay up King of the Table style. Yeah. So I actually won the left arm absolute championship, I guess you could call it, by going through all the class winners all the way down. And the next, I think it was Anthony D'Alantonio won the right arm. Wow. Because Mike Gould beat me at the right arm. And then he started facing off against everybody. And you had to arm wrestle a lot. Like I had to go through the Masters and Grandmasters winners too. So after I was done, all of the open guys or all the senior guys, I had to pull Len Houghton. So, I mean, that was crazy. But it's, I think it was $500 or something like that. So That was a national championship where I actually made some money.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that was good.
Yeah.
Let's see that. Nice.
What is your favorite match you've had in your career for both of us?
Favorite? Fuck. I would have to say, most people never saw this. Eric Rusin was there. It was the 2007 Harley Pull. I believe I lost my first match left. No, I didn't. I was running the 8-hole way. And then when it came down to the finals, I lost to Lenny Lockhart, left arm. And then I just hit a little bit quicker and then beat him 2 times out. But both those matches were absolute wars with me completely open and him tight and me just waiting him out. I had to cut weight to 150. The weight cut itself was brutal on me, physically and psychologically. I haven't weighed that low since I was in my teens. So to come out with a victory, get a key for the Harley, but of course my key didn't start it. But that was still a huge, huge moment for me because I was, as the finals grew closer, I was getting getting very fatigued and stuff. So I would say that would probably be my most prideful favorite moment in arm wrestling. But there's been a lot. Losing to Paul Andrews' first match in the 2006 Kelowna Nationals in Kelowna, BC, and then I had to come through the whole class to face Marlon, where I lost to Marlon, but I took second. But I had to go through like 8-9 guys out of the B right from the get go. 2013. Wait, was the question super match? Maybe it was super match. I could be rambling. If it's strictly super match, was it super match or arm wrestling match?
It's just arm wrestling match. Yeah.
Another big one for me was 2013 in UAL, where I drew Corey Miller first match, lost, and then came through the B, beat Katowski, beat Sam Harris, beat a whole bunch to get back up to Corey in the finals and lose to him. But again, hard on the mind when you go into a class like that with 13, 14 guys, or I think there were 17, and you lose your first match because you drew the worst guy, the hardest guy, and then you got to make your way error-free, no margin of error throughout the rest of the class to get back to him. Got to stay fucking focused. So I think those three have to be probably, they're up there for sure.
Yeah. Chelsea says, I enjoyed watching Pull Earl. Well, that's funny because I was going to say 2008 National Championships with pulling Earl Wilson in the finals was probably my favorite match I ever had. It was the hardest tournament in the Nationals that I've pulled in a long time. And, I beat Earl both arms that day. But there were good wars, and he actually pulled me over, and I stopped him before the pin line and brought him back, which, that took I had to dig pretty deep on that one. Other ones of note that would be favorites would be Michael Todd at the Arnold Classic. Yeah. I won that match, and then going on, and I beat Devin a couple times at the Arnolds too over the years. So those were all fun, and I guess they would be considered favorites. Christian Binney, not just at the 2003 Worlds, but going on and doing it again at the 2004 Harley Pull was pretty fun because he was pretty determined to come back and kick my ass. It didn't work out that way.
Yeah. I'll give one more before I forget, and since we had Canadian content on our show.
Yeah.
2007 Nationals at New Brunswick. I get to the finals with Dan Gallo. Dan was super strong at the time, a left arm, tremendous hook puller. I had to beat him twice. And I beat him once, and the second time he just comes to the table. He's, pounding the table, super aggressive, flexed. He was such an intimidating puller to pull against. And we had both our matches were 1-minute hook wars, even more so with stoppages because of elbow fouls. I ended up beating him. Dave Hicks was the ref, and after the match, and it was like the last match was like, or the second to last match was like a minute. The Quebec pullers, this is when I wasn't so hated, started chanting Quebec, 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 and there was big. And then when I won, Denny Dubray jumped on stage and he gave me a big hug because I was training with him at the time. He was my mentor, and then as me and Dan were walking off stage, Dave Hicks came up to us and put his arms around us and says, even in my prime, I don't think I could have hooked for minutes like that in the finals, like straight elbow to elbow. And anyway, so that meant a lot coming from him. So that was another big moment as well.
Yeah, and moments are kind of what make up the sport. And the one last one that is also equally my favorite, and I've talked about this match, was Anatolia, the 2001 Worlds, when I had the 5-minute long match with him.
5 minutes. Wow.
Well, it was all in total, yeah, probably 5 minutes of actual arm wrestling, and ended up on fouls, which was nuts.
Jesus.
So we got one. This is number 5 from Kelly. How do you feel about the current WAL bracket system or lack of it? Do you think they need to start with a new bracket system to make it more clear, or is it okay as is?
You go ahead.
I think that WAL is doing a UFC style of setting up cards, and not all the matches in UFC make sense or have a bracket system coming through there, but I think that it provides the best possible entertainment value in these matches. So I think for the product that they're putting out, the brackets are fine the way they are. They're not the bracket, but the way they select the matches are okay the way it is. I don't think they would want to handcuff themselves into a feeder system where someone that automatically wins this tournament gets put into a match with the hammer holder. I think the way they're doing it is the way that it should be. Is it fair? Not always, but I mean,
they're going from a different angle, and I don't know so much brackets, but I think it's an exercise in motion with them, and they're going to go as they see it gaining popularity or losing popularity. But my criticism on them is matching up certain pullers. But I mean, it's a learning process for them. It's hard to argue that they're not on the right track. So,
yeah, good on that one.
Yeah, Tyler Bolzan just made a great statement regarding nationals, and I've always said this, that we have too many classes, and it gets a little bit diluted. I would like to see a lot less classes, half in the open, a half in masters.
Me too, and I'd like to see that at the world level as well.
Yeah, I mean, we walk out of the nationals, Canadian nationals, with 73 national champions. Like it's almost like 30% of all the players become champions. It's like it's a little bit crazy.
And that is why it also costs so much to run a national championship. So you're handing out 70 some national titles. You got to provide an award that's worthy of a national championship and second and third.
Yeah.
So we also have, do you think USA versus Canada or North America versus the world is something you would like to see, and how do you feel the Canadians would do? I personally don't find I wouldn't be compelled to watch it unless they selected certain arm wrestlers. Logistically, it would be a bit of a nightmare to put together, but putting together a team to take on, it would be subjective to whoever's putting the event on. It's arm wrestling. I'll watch it. It'll be entertaining, but I'm not certain that I would get behind the idea 100% as a concept to draw a lot of people into the sport. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't think we'll ever see this, because even if we see it, to get the best, you'd want to see the best of the best, and to get the best out of the best to join a team like that, it's tons of money. If you had that type of money, you'd run a kick-ass tournament instead, and the funding would be insane. North America versus the world wouldn't be a match. With the heavyweights, it could be close. Everyone else is going to get railed. Canada, USA, they have 10-1 population on us. So I mean, some classes, some matches would be cool. Theoretically, it makes sense. Logistically, it makes no sense, because it would cost too much money to get the best. It's almost like last couple of weeks ago we talked about state versus state. Now, state versus state, if we take 3 versus 3, is kind of feasible, because you only have to sponsor or fund three athletes per state. When you're talking a full country, it's not. It's ridiculous, man. And then who goes? Like, who represents Canada? Did the best guy go? Who represents the U.S.? It creates a lot of bullshit. But theoretically, sure. Logistically, never.
How long do you feel this WAL bubble will last? I.e., Worldwide Sports to Over the Top to ESPN to UAL to Game of Arms to Wall. Seems like only a few years, then the bottom comes out.
Yeah. I said that a few years ago, and they're still running. They're doing good stuff. They're marketing fairly well. They're putting a lot of money into it. It's almost like they're going into uncharted waters. Uh, so it's really hard to predict where it's going to go.
Yeah.
The stuff that I don't like about it, seemingly, is what most of the non-arm wrestling demographic loves about it. So it does have long-term value, I think. Who knows, man? It's very, very because even if it seems like it's successful and it seems like the sport is gravitating towards it, I've seen Kaplan pull the plug on a tournament 2 days before. So even though it looks good for us, if one day Kaplan wakes up on a Tuesday and realizes it's no longer financially feasible for him, he'll pull the plug and won't bat an eyelash. I think that's a little bit unpredictable and dangerous. So it's really hard to predict. It could go another 5 years. It could end this year. I don't know.
I think if you put this setting of WAL back in 1980 and you were relying on television instead of internet purchases,
right,
it probably would have a limited shelf life. But I think that the growth of it is largely because of the characters and the arm wrestlers doing stuff outside of the WAL to build the WAL. So
which is what they need. So
yeah. So
right, yeah.
As long as it's building in that direction and people have the power to do that, I think it will continue to see growth. Someday, Steve Kaplan might decide that he doesn't like arm wrestling anymore and pull the pin. But I believe that someone else will immediately pick up where he left off, see the opportunity there if it continues to grow. And if it does continue to grow, Steve Kaplan will run with it, I believe.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, there is like something happens like with AMC where they do a complete paradigm shift and they all of a sudden reality programming is no longer a thing they do and Game of Arms is gone. It's but I think that we have a pretty good, I won't say we're secure, but I think that we're going to go for a long time. What would it take to get the top pullers to a tournament? Money, and how much? $1,000? I think anytime that you could have arm wrestlers show up and be able to cover expenses and go home with a fairly decent amount of money in their pocket, you have an opportunity for a lot of them to show. Now, to get all of them seems to be something that takes a little bit more, and I think we saw that in the earlier rounds of the WAL tournament system when they did that a few years ago, when you had prize money down to 8th and everybody was there. Everyone that wasn't taken up in a contract from the UAL at the time.
Yeah. And that was an obscene amount of money paying down top 8, and I think first place was first place was $12,000 or
$20,000 at one point. And that might have been the tournament that never happened. But at one point they had $20,000 for first place, each arm, every weight class.
Yeah. Because if you look at historically through the sport, the events that attracted, I mean, you could go to certain events and the majority or a lot of pro pullers, the best were there. But it's very, very hard to locate a tournament where you can say the best from every weight class was there.
That's right.
But only because it takes an obscene amount of money, an obscene amount of money.
Yeah. And even saying that in WAL, that big tournament where it was all the best North Americans were there.
Right. Yeah.
You didn't see the Europeans come over, maybe because they had doubts. 2000, Eric Rusen says 2015, $20,000. That was the tournament where you saw probably the most elite arm wrestlers of any other tournament in the world.
Yeah. And look at the the budget, right? It's all about the budget.
Well, that's insane to come up with that amount of money to run a tournament.
I always thought it's going to take either like a very wealthy human being that loves arm wrestling, or an arm wrestler who wins the lottery.
Yeah,
and see something special. But if it's a guy trying to market and make it into a business, he's reluctant to give out that type of money because he's not getting it back.
There's no back end. No. So Chelsea pointed out that ArmTV had something going but didn't get there. I bet you Gary Roberts wishes that he would have just went with the YouTube model way back when he started instead of trying to get subscriptions, because the YouTube model probably would have paid him a lot more money overall, especially with the production values he was putting into some of the stuff he was doing.
Yeah,
To gain top end horsepower, the only way to use weights, or can the same effect be achieved with bands, or is it always a mixture? Well, I don't use bands at all, so I'm the wrong guy to ask for that.
When you want to talk about biologically the most output that an arm can put on the table, you have to look at static and dynamic strength, which means that if you take someone who's maxed out their static ability and add 40-50% on their dynamic strength, it adds to the whole animal. So the answer is it's a combination of static and dynamic. I've always said when you've maxed out on your static or your elbows are taxed, you max out you work on your dynamic full range. If your full range is taxed out or plateauing, you go back to, and your elbows feel great, you go back to static. But it's a combination of two. So bands, never been a fan of bands. Bands don't make that much sense to me. Bands are good for warming up. Other than that, I myself never got any gains on bands. I heard Dave Chafee has, but although he's a natural freak with a monster hand, so I'm reluctant to take that into account. I take his gains into account strictly on that. I think the gym is huge and the table is huge with human beings as practice resistance, not bands or cables.
Well, the bands would also be like, I'd need a wall that had 50 different resistance levels on bands. So it's yeah, I'm not
also, the bands also if you're going to start, when you're talking about maxing out high end power, you're talking about going into very, very, very high resistance levels. And with bands, because there's so much elasticity and negative coil type stuff, your risk of injury increases as well as cables. That's why I kind of like when you're maxing out. If you want to max out your statics, the best is against an equal foe on the practice table, because you're either going to get pinned or you're going to resist. It's not like a cable machine with 140 pounds or bands where if you just kind of hit the wrong angle, it's going to fly your arm across the table.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of talk to your partner. You can say a little bit less here. You know, when he can kind of, there's a lot more play, which minimizes the injury with a human, opposed to an apparatus with cable or a band.
Yeah. Eric pointed out that the prize money for that WL event was $308,000.
There you go.
And that's not including the production costs.
Yeah, $250,000. Yeah, so there you go. Craziness.
More from Kelly. How many workouts / exercises do you do in a session? For me, 4 to 5. Like, it's sometimes 3, usually 4. I have a pretty solid regimen that I do, and it's I try not to make it too complicated where I'm going all over and doing 2 sets of 15 things. Like, it's going to be a few 3 or 4 hard sets of each exercise, and usually it's around 4.
The best template I've ever used since I've started arm wrestling is a 2-day split where one day it's all out. I call it the complete max workout, where I take one upper body and one lower body. So upper body pull, which would be like a back or a bicep, or it's most likely a compound thing, and a lower body push. And that would be one running kind of like in a superset fashion, about a 30-minute workout, and your central nervous system is so taxed you're fucking done. The next day, because your central nervous system needs time to recover, it would be my fucking arm wrestling wrist cable 50% type BS rehab, rotator cuff stuff, stretching. And then the following day would be back to upper body push, lower body pull. So lower body hill sprints, upper body standing military press, dumbbell snatches, barbell snatches, something like that. So that's usually my best template to get gains and to minimize injury and overtraining.
It's like you're speaking different language to me.
I'm not we should work out sometime. I do not work well with multiple things. I don't multitask. Give me one exercise, 10 working sets until I'm vomiting on the ground. I don't like incorporating too many things in a workout. It's too complicated for me. I'm about simplicity until I can't move.
Okay. On that vein then, on the simplicity, and I agree, I like simplicity too. But we talked a little bit about Travis's video where he does his 6 exercises. For me, that would be like I could not do those and think that I would be an effective arm wrestler at all.
Travis does not like pain. Travis does not like to exert himself. So everything he does is based on avoiding exertion and pain. I love pain. I love exertion. I sleep better when my body is aching, when I know I've pushed limits. My workouts are conducive to this. It's just I don't want to run from my opponent. I want my opponent to set, and I want to see if I can go through my opponent. Two different mindsets, and my workouts are less is more. I used to write down these workouts of, okay, I'm going to do 4 chest exercises, and I'm going to do, Jesus, man, like, it doesn't work. And what happens is, as you incorporate more exercises to a body part, when you do plateau, what do you go to? Like, if you're doing flies, if you do a bench press and you do flies and then you do incline press and you do that standard for 8 weeks, and then you plateau and you're like, okay, well, I'll just change my workout. What are you changing it to? Push-ups? You maxed out your angles and vectors to the point where now you're plateaued for a while. I'd rather journal my bench press. Week, closed grip. I always do closed grip, neutral grip bench press. For 6 consecutive weeks, I go up 3%, 4%. And when for 2 consecutive weeks in a row, I can't up my weight, I trash it, and I start with flies, or I start with, not flies, it's not compound, but incline dumbbell presses. And for 6 consecutive weeks, I build that up. 8 consecutive weeks, and when I plateau, I go back to bench press or something else, and I'm constantly making gains. The more you incorporate something into a workout, the more it looks, oh wow, look at the exercises I'm doing. That's great. When you plateau, what are you leaving yourself with? You're not leaving yourself with much. When you're building a routine, it can't just be all this stuff is cool. It's when you plateau, which you will, what can you go to? Now you better leave an opening. You better leave an opening for what to go to. You better think 8 weeks later, because if you don't, you're just going to plateau and you're not going to be able to get out of it.
Interesting. I can tell you that it's interesting because my training partner is Spencer Cleaver, and he's a new arm wrestler. And he has been kind of doing what I do in the gym. And as a new guy, it's probably not the best plan that we've ever come up with. But the strength gains that he's getting have been dramatic. Like, he's moved from a 1 into potentially a 2 immediately. Like, he's all of a sudden he's a contender at these tournaments where before he wasn't even considered in the conversation. So even advanced routines, if done with enough care, can be good for the beginner guys. And I will use extreme caution when I say that.
Yeah. I had one guy tell me, he says, my bicep lock, I have a good hand, I have a good attack, but people seem to get through my lock pretty quickly on the defensive end of the table if a guy can hook me. He says, what do I do? I said, on your next practice, you have one goal. Get pinned 200 times. Resist getting pinned 200 times and have your arm pinned 200 times. I mean, sometimes simple is better. Do simple incredibly fucking hard. Things can get too complex, but I'm myopic. I have tunnel vision. You give me too many things. If you give me a list of 5 things to talk about on the show, 1 will get forgotten about at least. If you say we're going to talk about one thing and we're going to go through it like a motherfucker, I'm all in. Like I'm just myopic that way. So my training reflects my personality. So I'm not going to tell anyone to train like me, but for me, when I write down my workouts, if there's more than 3 things I got to remember on high end day, I'm already lost. Like, it's 2 things, 35, 40 minutes with the warm up, and you can be sure I'm going to feel it for 2 days straight.
All right, buddy. Last question.
Yeah.
Last question. This will be the last one. We got to close it out. This 10-minute episode turned into over an hour.
Yeah.
With the recent matches of Matt Mask versus Passmore and Withers, do you feel once you are on the big stage, you should not pull local tourneys, since there is more to lose than there is to gain, unless there is a big payday?
No. We all arm wrestle because we love to arm wrestle, and I don't know what motivated Matt Mask to go down there and pull. Maybe he was asked. Maybe he just wanted to pull. He's obviously off cycle. Took a legendary ass kicking. Nothing wrong with it. It helped the event. It brought people to the event. It made the event bigger. The only downside is he took some losses, but so be it. Like top guys avoiding all other non-pro leagues or all wall. It just hurts the sport. I mean, RVJ is going to New England Championships. And that's awesome. That's going to bring in Brendan. That's going to bring in other guys that want to take a shot at him. That helps the sport. one thing I'll say about Wall is Kaplan's not limiting his pullers, so they're able to expand and go elsewhere in these smaller events, and that's a great thing. So I applaud Mask for going down to Mississippi and pulling multiple super matches and signing autographs and doing all that stuff. It's great for the sport. From a personal standpoint, if I'm his coach and advisor, maybe not. Maybe he should be in the gym. Maybe he should just be peaking and totally focused on next year's card. But really, is one tournament in the next 4 months really going to hurt his training? I mean, sometimes it's good to get out there and just enjoy the sport and mix it up.
Yeah, it keeps you sharp. And I think if anyone is trying to protect their title or protect themselves in the WAL, I think that will eventually catch up with them, and they need to get out there and test the waters. And maybe a little bit of a dose of reality is good for Matt to see that he can't just show up somewhere and pull a couple of guys that's, maybe perhaps he took them lightly. Maybe something else was going on, but I mean, those guys really stepped up, and they're not far behind that elite level in WAL. And I think it's healthy for guys to see where they stand in there. Matt took some unexpected losses. It got us talking about it, and I don't know if that's going to have an impact on what happens in WAL over the next little while or not.
I'm more impressed with Matt's recent losses than I am with his wins. Like I just thought this was a big character deal, because he had nothing to gain but only stuff to lose. You never see Devin do that. You never see Devin take a couple super matches at Kentucky State. You never see that. So I commend Matt for that. I mean, that showed a lot of character. And I say he's off cycle. What do I know? Like, it's just speculation. Maybe he's totally natural. But whatever motivated him to go down there, love it.
He hasn't just gone there. Like, Matt's been going all over the place.
Yeah.
Like he, I mean, I think he went down and he took a loss to Cody Merritt, left-handed as well. Yeah. But I mean, man, he's pulling. And I talked to Matt just briefly, just via text, about the matches, and he said just nothing seemed to be working for him. So, they have an off day too, but I mean, good on him for going down there and pulling.
It's not like they fed him.
No.
Paul's just killing everyone. I had Herman beating Paul, and it ended up like a 3-3 draw, which I can go into a rant about. We shouldn't have draws. But anyway, he stepped up his game against Herman. I mean, his side pressure looked insane. Crazy elite level side pressure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like they fed Mask a couple.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I got good, it was because, or when people ask you how to get good, quickly, it's by hitting lots and lots of tournaments. So why would anyone hide away and just pull the super matches when, iron sharpens iron, and you should go through that as much as you possibly can. And, I would love to see, it's great for everybody. And now you have 2 more prospects that might get their shot in the WAL just based on the win last weekend.
Withers, I mean, come on.
Yeah. All right, Gobby, you ready to wrap up the show?
Yeah, we're good, man.
So let's officially announce Paul Passmore Wednesday.
Perfect.
Times and everything will be announced on the Arm Crossfire Facebook page. Stay tuned for that. And you know what, guys? If we missed your question in the comments, please send those questions in to CanadianGangsters@gmail.com so that we will not miss them on the next episode. And check out readygo.ca for the new contest that's coming up. Click on the About Us tab in the corner, and you will learn all you need to know about that contest.
Right on.
See you guys.
Awesome. See you guys Wednesday.